A cold dawn broke across the empty plains, a veil of pale gold spilling over frost-laced grass and forgotten fences. Dust floated like spirits between the hills, rising and falling in the wind's quiet breath. A lone rider approached from the east, coat flapping like a tired flag, his silhouette framed against the slow-burning horizon. The horse beneath him, a dark bay named Ash, exhaled plumes of white that drifted upward and vanished. Ahead waited a weathered house that leaned to one side, its timbers grayed and bones showing. A crow perched on the chimney and cried once, a sound too human in its sadness. Some lands remember. They breathe through the wood and whisper through the grass, waiting for a soul broken enough to listen. Eli Mercer had been that soul for a long while. Though he wouldn't have said so, Dry Willow Bend was near empty by the time he rode in. The town's auction bell clanged in the chill morning air, echoing across storefronts where only a few old men leaned to watch. The Maddox homestead was the final property on the list, and nobody bid, not at first. Folks said the place was cursed, that no man stayed there longer than a week without going half mad. Some whispered that the Maddox woman still wandered the fields after dusk, calling for her daughter lost in the fire. Marshall Dwyer stood by the railing, boots dusty, hand resting easy on his belt. He gave Eli a look that held both pity and warning. $300, Eli said quietly, voice low enough to draw murmurs. Someone spat into the dust. Mercer's lost his senses, another man muttered. The marshal shook his head. You sure about this, Eli? That place, it's just land, Eli said. Not a ghost. When the gavel hit wood, the sound cracked through the square like a shot. Eli tipped his hat, paid his due, and mounted his horse. Behind him, the whispers followed, a mix of judgment and pity that clung to him like dust. By noon, he reached the property. The homestead stood at the edge of a shallow rise, overlooking a stretch of brittle wheat and dry riverbed. The fences sagged like old men. The barn leaned forward as if whispering to the earth. He dismounted, ran a calloused hand over the porch railing, feeling the roughness of rot and time. The air smelled of dust and something faintly sweet, the ghost of lilacs long gone. Ash refused to enter the barn. He tossed his head and stamped his hoof, eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the half-opened doors. Eli chuckled softly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Guess you're smarter than me, he murmured. Inside the house, light seeped through cracks in the walls. He set a small cot near the cold hearth and lit his lantern. The glow breathed life into the room, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily like memory caught midair. He noticed old scorch marks on the floorboards, black streaks spidering toward the walls. That night, he lay awake listening to the wind hum through the rafters. Somewhere in that hum, he swore he heard a door tapping gently, a rhythmic sound like knuckles on wood. Then a faint tune drifted through the cracks, soft and sweet, as if someone were humming to a child. He didn't move. He simply listened, eyes open to the dark, because sometimes silence was worse than sound. Morning brought gray light and the rustle of grass. Eli stepped outside to find a wagon approaching from the south. A woman sat at the reins, plain dress, hair tied with a strip of leather, her face unreadable. "You're Mercer?" she asked when she drew close. He nodded. "I'm June Hollis. Marshall sent me. Said you might need supplies." He thanked her without looking up. She studied the homestead with quiet curiosity. "Wind carries voices here," she said, half to herself. Eli gave a faint smile. Maybe they just never left. Her eyes flicked to the horse, who was staring at the old well beyond the fence. "Animals see clearer than we do," she murmured. Their conversation was little more than fragments, yet something in her voice lingered after she left. When Eli walked toward the well later that evening, he saw something glinting in the dirt, a small buckle, the kind that might belong to a child's boot. He turned it over in his palm, thumb tracing the curve of the metal. Then he slipped it into his pocket and said nothing. Days passed with a rhythm both lonely and familiar. Eli repaired the fences, cleared debris, and mended the roof where the rain had broken through. Each night the house seemed to breathe beside him, creaking, sighing, remembering. Once he woke to find the child's buckle placed neatly on his bedside table. His breath caught. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered to the dark, "If you're here, I'm sorry." Ash grew restless in those days. Every evening, just before sunset, he would paw at the ground behind the barn, snorting, circling, digging into the same patch of soil. Eli tried to lead him away, but the horse refused. The sound of hoof on dirt became the homestead's heartbeat. Steady, searching in town, gossip began to spread. They said Mercer talked to himself, that the haunted place had taken his mind same as Maddox's years ago. June heard them at the feed store and said nothing, though her eyes narrowed at the cruelty. She had her own share of whispers, a woman without husband or kin, traveling alone, sleeping where she could point one dusk. Eli found her kneeling by the stream near his land, washing her hands until the skin reddened. The light made her hair glow copper. She didn't startle when he approached. "You can't mend what you refuse to face," she said softly, as if reading his thoughts. Their hands brushed when she stood. The touch was small, accidental, yet it felt like something had shifted, not healed, but stirred. That night, as clouds rolled low over the plains, Ash screamed, a sharp, terrified sound that split the silence. Eli ran to the barn, lantern swinging, light trembling against the walls. The horse was striking the ground again, hooves clanging against something solid beneath the dirt. Metal, not stone. Eli knelt, breath shaking. His fingers dug through the cold earth until they struck iron. A box, heavy and rusted, buried deep beneath the stable floor. The lantern flickered. The wind fell still. And somewhere in the distance, the crow called once more, low and final. Morning came in gray sheets of mist that rolled across the fields like smoke from an old fire. The air was still, unnaturally so, and Eli stood by the barn with dirt under his nails and dread in his chest. The spot where Ash had dug yawned open, a shallow wound in the earth. Inside, the iron box waited, its hinges orange with rust, its lid sealed as if the land itself had swallowed a secret it didn't want to give back. June arrived without being called. Her wagon creaked softly, wheels whispering through the wet grass. She stepped down and said nothing for a long while, only watched the box like it might breathe. "I felt something last night," she said finally. "Couldn't sleep. Figured you shouldn't face it alone." Eli nodded, though his voice had gone somewhere far away. "You think the stories were true?" "Doesn't matter what I think," she said. "What matters is what you're carrying." They crouched beside the iron chest. Eli's hands trembled as he pried at the lock with a rusted chisel. The metal gave with a tired sigh, and the lid groaned open an inch before stopping, as if resisting. The smell that rose wasn't rot, but old smoke, sweet and bitter, like wood that once burned for warmth. June turned her face aside. "Maybe we shouldn't open it," she whispered. "The dead put things away for a reason." Eli's eyes stayed fixed on the box. "The dead already opened it in me." Together, they lifted the lid. Inside was not gold or bone, but something far quieter, a child's locket, a charred journal, and a glass jar sealed with wax. The jar's contents shimmered faintly, ashes, maybe, or dust mixed with soil. A note was wrapped around it, edges curled and ink faded but still legible. Eli unfolded it carefully. "Forgive me, Elsie. I couldn't save her. I buried her here, where she still dreams." H. Maddox, the name struck through him like lightning through dry timber. Elsie, his wife's name. His breath faltered. He read the words again and again, but they refused to change. June's hand brushed his sleeve, steadying. "You knew her?" He shook his head slowly, eyes glassed with memory. "No, but I lost my own Elsie the same way. Fire took her. Took both of them." For a moment, the wind picked up, carrying a low hum through the fence rails, a sound like someone singing far away. Eli closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, he saw the barn years ago, flames leaping like beasts, smoke clawing the sky, his horse dragging him out while his wife's voice vanished inside the roar. He had never forgiven himself for surviving. When he opened his eyes again, June was still there, her palm warm against his shoulder. "You can't bury what's asking to be seen," she said softly. "I don't know how," he whispered. "Then let's learn together." They decided to lay the box to rest properly. The day darkened fast, a storm rolling over the horizon, thunder low and constant like the rumble of hooves underground. They dug beneath the willow tree near the stream, where the soil was softer and smelled of life. Rain began to fall in slow, fat drops that soaked their shoulders. June murmured a prayer, not a church one, but a field one, made of breath and sky. Eli whispered beside her. Maybe it wasn't haunted. Maybe it was just lonely. When the box sank into the earth, the storm seemed to hesitate, holding its breath. Then the wind shifted warm. The air cleared. The rain slowed to a hush. The lantern flame beside them steadied, glowing calm and golden. Ash bowed his head toward the grave, ears twitching once, then stilled. The land seemed to exhale. They stayed there long after, watching the clouds drift apart, the last of the thunder rolling toward the far hills. Eli felt something in his chest loosen, something that had been wound tight for years. He pressed the child's locket, now empty, into the soil and whispered, "Sleep easy now." When dawn came again, it was different. The sky was washed clean, the sun gentle and forgiving. The air smelled of wet wheat and morning. Inside the house, the floorboards no longer creaked with unease. The light through the windows fell warm and even. June brewed coffee on the stove, her movements unhurried. Eli repaired the barn roof, nails tapping steady and assured no one in town spoke of curses anymore. The stories changed, as stories always do. They said Mercer had made peace with the ghosts, that the Maddox place finally stood quiet. Some claimed they saw smoke from the chimney at night and laughter drifting on the wind. But those who'd been close enough knew better, knew it wasn't haunting that filled the air, but life returning to a house that had waited too long to be loved. June stayed. She didn't ask, and Eli didn't invite. She simply never left. She tended the horses, brushed the dust from windows, planted lilacs near the porch. They never spoke of love, yet it grew between them, quiet as grass, steady as sunrise. Sometimes, when their hands brushed while working, neither pulled away. One evening, Eli stood by the stream, watching the willows sway. He thought of the fire, of the years lost to silence, of the note that had tied two tragedies into one mercy. The land wasn't haunted anymore. It had just needed someone willing to listen. Maybe every haunted place is only waiting for the living to forgive themselves. Maybe the earth keeps our grief until we're brave enough to lay it down. As the sun sank low, June stepped out onto the porch, her hair caught by the wind. Eli turned toward her, hat in hand, the gold light washing across both their faces. He smiled, small, honest, the kind that comes when a burden finally lifts. "Some homes aren't bought," he said softly. "They choose you." The wind passed gently through the fields, carrying the scent of lilacs and rain. The house behind them stood strong now, breathing like something alive, its silence finally at peace. And somewhere beyond the hills, a crow took flight, black wings cutting across the new morning sky.